I had no idea that the day I had the most success in my career would set off a series of events that would ultimately cost me everything. Olivia grinned as she entered the restaurant, but her eyes were unreadable and icy. Alex Martin is my name. I've been the executive chef of Willow and Sage, a renowned fine dining establishment located in the center of downtown Toronto, Ontario for the past 7 years. I'm 44 years old. I turned this business from a small local hangout into a gourmet destination known for its genuine meals influenced by traditional European cuisine. I never followed fads or ostentatious displays. Instead, I excelled at creating tastes that brought comfort, simplicity, and home to people. The restaurant was bustling that night in late September, and every table was completely reserved. The intimate dining area was filled with the delicious fragrances of freshly baked bread, braised lamb seasoned with rosemary, and substantial fall vegetable soups, seeing contented smiles and hearing soft mutterings of gratitude from our devoted guests made me feel proud, perhaps a little too proud. Just 2 weeks prior, Olivia Bennett had taken over as the restaurant's new owner. She was young, ambitious, and came from a startup rather than the hospitality industry. She was motivated by Instagram likes and revenues, two things I knew very little about and even less about. She hadn't been here since taking over, and I could feel her presence like a cold breeze coming through the kitchen doors tonight. Olivia walked carefully by the dining tables, taking in every detail. And Ben Carter, my sous chef and best buddy in the kitchen, gently nudged me. After years of working with me, Ben was able to read my thoughts nearly as well as the handwritten comments on the vintage recipe cards from our family that were placed above our workstation. "Calm down, Alex," he said quietly as he carefully plated a meal. "She's just making her rounds." I nodded, but I had a gut feeling that this was more than a friendly encounter. Olivia stopped by the wall and looked at a framed picture of our kitchen crew from 3 years ago. It caught a moment of unadulterated happiness and solidarity following our first culinary award, which felt like a real accomplishment that had been gained via diligence and hard work. She stayed there a bit longer than she should have, a slight grimace forming and then disappearing behind her calm smile. Olivia came up to me personally for the first time as the dinner service was coming to an end and the guests were gradually leaving. "Alex, can we talk privately for a moment?" she said in a kind but strangely aloof voice. Instinctively, my gut nodded, but I was able to keep my composure. "Of course, Olivia," was my courteous response. We took a seat in a peaceful nook close to the bar away from the busy kitchen. "Your menu is impressive, truly it is," she said in a measured voice after taking another look around the room before turning to face me. "But have you ever thought about updating it to appeal more directly to the newer, younger demographic?" she asked. It seemed more like a velvet-wrapped judgment than an inquiry. I inhaled slowly while attempting to restrain my first response. "The reason people come here, Olivia, is because we offer something authentic." I said with precision. "Our guests value tradition. They appreciate dishes that have stood the test of time." She nodded slowly, her lips slightly pursed as though she was considering what to say next. Her tone was definitely forceful, yet her grin was kind. "I appreciate tradition too, Alex, but tradition alone doesn't keep us relevant. Think about it, would you? Perhaps we can revisit this conversation soon." I stood there in uncomfortable stillness as she turned and left. Ben sensed my uneasiness and eyed me warily from the kitchen door. I looked at the old picture on the wall once more as I returned to the kitchen, recalling the many evenings we had spent putting our all into making dishes that were important. I drew Ben aside later that evening as the employees were cleaning and getting ready to shut. I added softly, "She wants to change things," in a worried tone. He leaned on the steel countertop and let out a gentle sigh. "We've seen new owners before, Alex. They come in with ideas and eventually leave us alone because it works." I said, "This feels different," and shook my head. "Something about Olivia feels unsettling." Ben patted me on the shoulder in a comforting manner. Calmly, "We've built something special here," he added. "She'll come around." Even though I wasn't really sure, I gave him a small smile of appreciation for his confidence. I passed well-known sights illuminated by the gentle glow of streetlights as I made my way home that evening through Toronto's peaceful streets. Concerns and unresolved questions filled my head. Would Olivia really win Willow and Sage over? Would there still be room for me if she did? I thought back to the first time I had walked into this kitchen full of excitement and anticipation for the bright future that lay ahead. But just now, all I could sense was that everything valuable that I had worked so hard to build was about to be taken away. That night, I didn't sleep well. Rather, I awoke and gazed at the ceiling, contemplating how long I had left before everything was irrevocably altered. I was suddenly awakened at midnight by Olivia's text. It was brief, cryptic, and in some ways its brevity made it seem colder. Do we really need to keep serving this classic dish flashed sharply from my phone screen? I felt that this was more than just a random late-night thinking, so I rubbed my eyes and read the message twice. A feeling of dread took hold of me. This was about transforming Willow and Sage's souls, not just about a meal. I kept thinking about Ben's warning, "Alex, she won't confront you openly." Olivia has a distinct style. She uses digital communications and subtlety to get her way. I typed slowly and methodically as I gave great thought to my response. "Olivia, I understand your concern, but our classics are the cornerstone of our success. Can we discuss this in person tomorrow?" I was waiting for her to respond, but she didn't. The quiet was deliberate, oppressive. I didn't get any sleep the rest of the night. I got to the restaurant early the following morning in the hopes that the preparation routine would help me relax. Our pastry cook, Sophie Dubois, glanced up abruptly from her desk as I walked into the kitchen. Her eyes immediately filled with alarm. "Did you get her email this morning?" Once more, my stomach grew constricted. "No, what email?" "She's called for a meeting staff and management today at 10. No explanation." Sophie's normally composed voice faltered a little. I mustered a grin to comfort her. "It'll be fine, Sophie. Probably routine updates." However, we both knew better. The whole staff gathered in silence in the main dining room at exactly 10 o'clock, their eyes darting nervously from one another. Olivia walked with assurance close to the door, looking flawless and beaming, yet something about her grin made me shudder. With a smooth and commanding voice, she opened, "I've brought you all together today to talk about our exciting new vision. Willow and Sage is a wonderful establishment, but we must evolve to stay competitive. Starting immediately, we'll begin integrating dishes designed specifically for modern trends and aesthetics." She stopped and looked right at me, then went on. "I appreciate Chef Alex's dedication to tradition, but effective today, I'll personally oversee the menu changes to ensure alignment with our new direction." Quiet. The employee's gazes automatically shifted to me in an attempt to find direction or comfort. Despite the flood of emotions churning inside of me, I pushed myself to keep my mouth shut. One of our younger cooks, Ryan Mitchell, came cautiously up to me later that day. "Chef, she just asked me to prepare test dishes that focus more on appearance for photos rather than flavor. I don't feel good about it." Grasping the edge of the stainless steel counter, I let out a loud sigh. "Just do your best, Ryan. We're still here and our values won't change overnight." However, Olivia's vision grew clearer over the course of the following few days. She spent hours in the dining room taking styled pictures of ornate, vibrant dishes that had little in common with the hearty fare on which we had established our name. Regulars started muttering grievances to waiters. Ben and Sophie exchanged anxious looks behind the kitchen doors. I heard Olivia talking angrily on the phone from her workplace one evening after closing. My curiosity drew me in, and I took modest steps down the corridor. "Kevin is ready to take over immediately. Alex is too stubborn. He just doesn't fit our brand anymore. The sooner we replace him, the quicker we'll move forward," she said in a strained, impatient voice that reverberated faintly. For a second, the words made me gasp for air, with my heart thumping loudly in my ears. I took a step back and leaned hard against the wall. Kevin, whomever he was poised to take my place. Although I had anticipated this, it was a shock to hear it expressed so directly. Silently making my way back to the kitchen, I reached into my knife roll and stroked the vintage chef's knife that my grandfather had given me when I first started working as a cook. For a moment, the smooth wooden handle from years of use gave me comfort. It served as a reminder of my motivation for cooking, as well as of custom family and principles that no fad could ever replace. A few moments later, Ben discovered me there, his face deepening with worry. "Alex, what happened?" I looked up, speaking steadily in spite of my internal conflict. "They're planning to replace me," I overheard her. Anger flashed in his eyes as his face hardened. "That's ridiculous. She has no idea what she's destroying." I shook my head gently and tried to sound cool. "Maybe, but she's made up her mind. Ben, my days here are numbered." I felt grief weigh heavily on my shoulders as I stood silently for a minute, gazing around the kitchen into which I had poured my soul. The truth is, Ben, we've created something special, but it was never ours to keep. At that moment, I realized my time at Willow and Sage was rapidly ending. With her calm yet firm voice, Olivia addressed me directly, saying, "We need something fresher, Alex, and unfortunately, you no longer fit that vision." Her remarks dangled in the office's quiet like a sharp dagger on a shaky balance, ready to drop. Nothing had prepared me for the hollow anguish that swept through my chest, even though I had expected this conversation. 7 years of dedication, ingenuity, and unrelenting labor are now disregarded as obsolete and unimportant. I looked at her for a long time, looking for signs of uncertainty or regret, but all I saw was impatience and resolve. I said, "I'm sorry to hear that," while maintaining a steady tone. "When should I leave?" Olivia appeared briefly taken aback by my poise, as though she had anticipated opposition or maybe begging. Her look was unreadable as she glanced at her laptop and then back at me. Calmly, "You have 2 weeks to transition smoothly," she said. "I'll need detailed recipes for all of the current dishes, particularly the signature ones." Slowly, I nodded already, choosing which recipes would be shared and which would be kept as closely guarded secrets. It was difficult to write down or duplicate such minute details that had been passed down through the generations. Willow and Sage might fall under Olivia's sway, but she would never be able to completely appreciate my food. I returned to the kitchen after leaving her office in silence, sensing that the crew was watching me. Ryan and Sophie looked at each other anxiously, with an anxious look on his face. Ben waited at the pass. My silence made it obvious what had happened, so he didn't need to inquire. As the final guest left that night, I was by myself at the prep table, carefully putting my knives in their shabby leather roll. Every blade evoked memories of late hours spent honing recipes, celebrating successes and forming friendships over seething sauces and flames. When I got to my grandfather's knife, a memento that had helped me at every turn in my culinary adventure, my hand faltered. It was a physical link to truth, tradition, and family that felt reassuring to hold. Ben slipped in, arms crossed and resting on the counter. His eyes, which were a mix of support and frustration, screamed more than words. "The words you deserve better than this, Alex," he whispered quietly. "We all do. This place won't be the same without you." I gave him a small grin, grateful for his devotion. Willow and Sage was always more than just me, Ben. The team made it special. Olivia doesn't understand that yet, but she will. Ben was gently joined by Sophie, who had a mournful expression on her generally calm face. "If you're leaving, Alex, we're not staying either. You know that, right?" Ryan was nearby, giving a solid nod of approval. I was grateful for their unfailing support, but it also made me feel even more lost. I appreciate that I answered kindly, but think carefully. Jobs aren't easy to find. Don't make hasty decisions on my account. Ben gave a hard shake of his head. "We're chefs, Alex. We can cook anywhere. But what we've built here, Olivia doesn't value that. She wants pretty plates, not meaningful food." I was really moved by their dedication. Additionally, it ignited a silent resolve in me that was gradually becoming brighter. I gave Olivia's request for recipes some more thinking, carefully weighing how much to provide. She desired Willow and Sage's essence without realizing what made them unique. It was heart, legacy, and experience, not just ingredients. I couldn't sleep that night at home, so I dug through a box of old stuff I'd put aside when my grandfather died. I found his leather-bound recipe book, the edges worn from decades of usage behind faded photos and handwritten comments. As I carefully turned the pages and came across handwritten remarks in his well-known tidy script, my heart began to race. There were recipes I'd learned as a kid, along with intimate notes about clients, supplies, and minor tweaks he'd made over years of meticulous improvement. While I was holding that ancient book, a definite notion started to take shape in my head. It was something daring, deeply ingrained in my identity, but completely novel for my line of work. Olivia's vision now included Willow and Sage, but my own journey could take a different turn and flourish on legacy and authenticity. I traced my thumb over my grandfather's sentences as I looked at his scribbled handwriting. I had the impression that he was mentoring me once more, reminding me of the value of custom morality and genuine culinary enthusiasm. I made up my mind with absolute clarity. I knew better than Olivia, who preferred innovation over identity. According to my grandfather, Good food doesn't need to change for fashion. It lasts because it's honest. Clarity enveloped me like a reassuring hug as I gazed down at the battered cover of his recipe book. Olivia desired something fresh, so I would demonstrate to her the power of something classic, genuine, and unquestionably genuine. On the morning we were going to open Martin's Hearth, Olivia's lawyer's letter arrived. Ben entered the room with a frown on his face and a hefty letter with my name neatly scrawled on it. I had just finished organizing the kitchen. He placed it in my hands and murmured softly, "It came by courier." It was a blow I hadn't anticipated, and its weight went beyond paper. I carefully cut the envelope open, a formal letter written by a downtown legal firm, and printed on Olivia's business letterhead contained accusations that I had broken the non-compete agreement in my previous job contract. The paper claimed that I had violated the law by establishing a competing restaurant that was 5 kilometers from Willow and Sage and provided similar culinary concepts. The letter threatened to take legal action if I didn't stop operations right away. The sounds of the busy kitchen faded into a low hum as I glanced at the text for a few seconds. My chest pounded with my heart. The excitement of our initial service, which was the result of months of effort, risk, and emotion, was abruptly overshadowed by formal legalese. Ben lingered close, Alex. I managed a weak smile while forcing a breath. Ben, we're not closing, not quite yet. I phoned my cousin Daniel Martin, a talented attorney, that afternoon, and we met at his Bloor Street office. His desk was piled high with papers, and the room had a subtle scent of coffee and old books. Daniel scowled as he sat back in his chair and hurriedly perused the message. He shook his head and remarked, "She's playing the non-compete card, I'll give her credit. She's smart." "Is it legally binding?" With a tighter voice than I had anticipated, I asked. With thoughtfulness, he tapped the letter. "It depends. I'll review the original contract. But as I recall it, it only applies if your business is regarded as a direct rival, which means that it has a similar menu target market and style." With a glimmer of hope, I nodded slowly and added more to myself than to Daniel. "We're not doing the same thing. Classic traditional Italian cuisine is the focus of Martin's Hearth. Sage and Willow have now completely merged. Edible flowers, foams, everything." Daniel smiled slightly at me. "That could be your escape route." The staff was huddled nervously at the pass when I got back to the restaurant. Sophie was the first to approach, her face anxious. She whispered, "We heard, are we all right?" Gathering them around the prep table, I tried to speak steadily. "The situation is as follows. Although Olivia is attempting to silence us, Daniel believes we have a point, particularly if we further embrace tradition." Ryan scowled a little. "You mean to add even more vintage elements?" "Exactly," I replied as the concept became more apparent to me. "No fashionable plating, no shortcuts. We emphasize what sets us apart using my grandfather's recipes, the old-fashioned way." Ben's shoulders relaxed a little as he exhaled slowly. "Alex, are you certain this can work?" I firmly met his eyes. It must. The days that followed were a haze of orderly mayhem. In addition to adding daily specials taken straight from my grandfather's notebook and redesigning the menu to eliminate any traces of fusion, we also adopted vintage-style presentation, including rustic bread baskets, candles on each table, and thick white china. For traditional cheeses and heritage veggies, we contacted nearby vendors in order to replicate my grandfather's trattoria in the pictures. I even located the vintage Chianti bottles that were used to contain dripped wax candles for every table. Consumers took notice. The word got out on social media in 48 hours. People shared photos of the olive oil cake, braised short ribs, and homemade pasta, calling the experience comfortable, nostalgic, and like stepping back in time. Daniel, meanwhile, prepared our legal defense in the background. He clarified over the phone that your strongest argument is that you're no longer competing in the same market. As we speak, I'm writing a formal response to Olivia's attorneys. The last candle was flickering low when I sat by myself in the dining room one evening after the ceremony. A few days prior, my father had given me the antique key of my grandfather's original trattoria in my pocket. It had turned into a tiny talisman that served as a reminder of why I was here and why this was important. Ben came in, gently drying his hands on a towel, and I looked up. "They will put up a fierce fight against us," he replied quietly. I whispered, my fingers twitching around the key. "I know, but I believe we have something that they are unable to touch." I gave myself permission to genuinely smile for the first time in weeks. Daniel called the following morning with some news. Alex, he remarked, his voice full of joy. The clause has a flaw. We can retaliate forcefully. I stood up straight, feeling the first wave of genuine relief. However, even as I hung up, I was certain that Olivia would not be leaving in silence. After looking at Daniel, I realized that the only way to move forward was to take a huge risk by returning completely to the traditional recipes and having faith in the foundations that shaped who I am. Olivia's restaurant was in even more disarray when I got an unexpected call. My phone buzzed in the middle of the afternoon as I stood at Martin's Hearth's kitchen window, watching the last of the snow melt off the walkway. Alex Martin. The voice on the call sounded polished and fluid. This is Michael Evans. I am among Willow and Sage's key investors. Have you got a moment? I hesitated as my chest began to tighten. Indeed, Michael. How may I assist you? Michael gave a quiet laugh. He hesitated and said, It's more about how I can help you. We have been keeping an eye on Willow and Sage's adjustment, and to be honest, it has been tumultuous. Reservations have decreased, our evaluations have plummeted, and Olivia's adjustments haven't exactly given us confidence. Leaning against the counter, I looked toward the dining room where Ben and Sophie were quietly joking with Ryan while laying tables. Uncertain of the direction this was taking, I answered cautiously, I'm sorry to hear that. Michael didn't pause at all. To be honest, Alex, a few of us cautioned Olivia against upsetting her regulars or firing the chef who established the brand's reputation. She didn't pay attention. We are now considering our choices. Additionally, it seems like your small business across town has a full schedule for the upcoming 2 months. A twinge of satisfaction and caution flashed through me. I acknowledge Martin's Hearth is doing well. Michael's voice faltered a little. Will you think about consulting? Assisting Olivia in momentarily stabilizing the ship. Of course you would receive excellent compensation. I didn't miss the irony. The same people who had rejected me were now subtly making their way back to me in the hopes that I would help them learn from their own errors. With cautious word choice, I said, Thank you for the offer, Michael, but I have a lot on my plate right now. A pause occurred. Consider it, he remarked with ease. A formal proposal will be sent to you by my assistant. As I was cleaning along the line that evening, Sophie came over and used a towel to wipe her hands. Word is spreading, she replied quietly. Willow and Sage is a disaster, according to customers' whispers. Some even gave us a call to express their gratitude for returning real food. Ben smirked and shook his head to join us. Isn't that poetic? With the day's burden bearing down on me, I nodded. They underestimated what this place could become, I muttered. Looking around the dimly lit dining room where the scent of freshly baked focaccia and braised lamb permeated the air. Olivia called in the afternoon after that. I contemplated for a second whether or not to respond. However, curiosity prevailed. Getting right to the point, she said, Alex, I want to make you an offer. With my phone glued to my ear, I took a seat in the corner booth by the window. Continue. She groaned and said, There's no easy way to say this. The restart hasn't gone smoothly. Kevin, things haven't gone as planned. If you return, I'm willing to give you complete creative power along with a profit-sharing arrangement. Assist me in fixing this. I had dreamed about that event innumerable times over the previous few weeks, but now that I was in front of it all, I could feel was clarity. I answered slowly, I appreciate the offer, Olivia, but I've moved on. Your restaurant is now Willow and Sage. Her tone became piercing. Alex used common sense. You cannot dispute the things we created together. A slight smile lifted the corner of my mouth. The instant you stopped listening, what we had built was long gone. She was tellingly silent on the telephone. I hope the best for you, Olivia, I said subtly. But now this is my path. Ben arched an eyebrow as we assembled for pre-service that evening. Did I see Olivia calling? Yep, I replied effortlessly, laying out the dough. What was it she desired? Ryan's eyes widened in interest as he asked. Dusting my hands with flour, I stopped. I answered with a small smile. Olivia wants me back, to put it simply. Sophie whistled quietly, and I felt the team's silent strength as I looked into their eyes, and I told her no. Light laughing filled the kitchen as they burst into cheers. The burden on my chest completely disappeared for the first time in months. At that moment, I realized that we were winning, not just surviving. Customers crowded into every seat as the evening went on, chattering softly in the candlelight. Between the kitchen and the dining room, I shook hands past plates and observed as smiles spread across both old and new faces. When the final plate was cleaned at the conclusion of the evening, Ben gave me a pat on the back. "Alex, she needs us right now. The opposite is not true." I grinned, feeling a mixture of excitement and tiredness. "We no longer have to make concessions," I stated plainly. "It's Olivia who needs us now." The dining room was silent when Olivia entered Martin's hearth for the first and last time. I saw her while I was finishing up a dish of braised short ribs at the pass. She stood just inside the doorway, looking around the crowded room with a look I was all too familiar with. Calculating, evaluating, and she thought always a few steps ahead. She seemed different tonight, though. Her eyes lacked incisive authority, and her shoulders lacked snappy assurance. Rather, I had a glimpse of something unexpected: resignation, perhaps even deference. Ben was the first to notice, stopping in the line next to me and whispering, "Well, it appears that the Queen has come," as he wiped his hands on his apron. Sophie noticed the change in the atmosphere as well, looking at me curiously. I just nodded, indicating that we would proceed as scheduled. Even though Olivia was present, she was no longer the one who dictated the pace. Not here. Olivia sat quietly at a corner table with a single glass of wine in front of her as the evening wore on. She didn't come over or ask for attention. She just watched. I kept myself occupied by going around the kitchen with Ryan, inspecting plates, tasting sauces, and distributing dishes. There was a smoldering indignation in me, but there was also a quieter feeling of closure. Daniel called around the end of service. With my phone close to my ear, I ventured outside into the refreshing night air. Daniel said good news without introducing himself. "Olivia has formally dropped the complaint. There is nothing left to fight for." I released a breath I had been holding without realizing it. "Thank you, Daniel." He went on, "There's more, her investors. She is being sued for making false statements. When she made her pitch to her investors, it appears that she overstated the restaurant's reputation because they were expecting your Willow and Sage, not hers." I let out a deep breath while gazing up at the Toronto cityscape, where lights glittered like silent witnesses to all that we had created. I whispered, "Looks like she's paying the price." The final diners were inside, completing dessert, as the candlelight filled the room with loving laughter. In front of an elderly couple celebrating their anniversary, Sophie displayed a slice of olive oil cake, the exact one Olivia's team had failed to recreate. Regulars across the room waved at me. Their eyes were pleasant and their faces were recognized. I hoped my granddad could witness the scene. Olivia hesitated at the kitchen door for a moment before getting up to go. We looked at each other for a long time. She gave me the smallest nod, no big motions, no words, and then turned to leave. She was never seen by me again. Willow and Sage closed it 3 days later. I didn't read the headlines in their entirety since they were so quick and brutal. From Darling to Disaster, a tale of ambition without substance, and how a star chef's exit toppled an empire. I didn't have to. Seeing Olivia fail wasn't the win for me. It was witnessing the success of Martin's hearth. We progressively grew, occupying the nearby area that had previously been my grandfather's first trattoria. The smell of freshly baked focaccia filled the rooms every night, and his old copper pans now hung proudly above the kitchen. My father arrived at the door on our 1-year anniversary. He appeared somewhat more stooped and older than I remembered, but his eyes softened as they met the busy dining room. "Well done," he replied, placing a hand on my shoulder. Before he could hide behind formality, I drew him into an embrace. "Please sit down," I said. "You have to taste something else." I prepared the meal for him myself that evening. For the first time in years, we had a meaningful conversation in between classes. About my grandfather, the past, and the years I spent pursuing a dream that up until now, neither of us had a clear understanding of. My father took out a small worn key from within his coat as the evening came to an end. "To the Campanian vineyard," he said quietly. "Although I believe it is now yours, your grandfather left it to me. Perhaps you'll become as skilled at making wine as you are at cooking." With a silent surge of emotion, I gripped the key firmly in my hand. I then sat by myself at the bar with a glass of Amaro, my grandfather's favorite. After the final table had been cleared and the kitchen lights had been turned down, beside me the ancient recipe book was open, its pages soiled and worn, a living reminder of the path that had led me to this point. With the exception of the slight hum of the city outside, the dining room was quiet. A copy of the evaluation that had decided our fate was framed on the wall close to the entrance. The heart of Willow and Sage didn't disappear. It simply moved across town and found its true home. I sipped slowly, allowing the warmth to seep into my bones. I would never aim to demolish Olivia's creation. All I wanted to do was construct something real, and that had been plenty in the end. The best retaliation isn't always retaliation at all. It's just about doing what you were destined to do and doing it effectively. Looking back, I can still feel the pain of betrayal and the icy smile that dismisses years of hard effort. However, I also recall the silent fulfillment that comes from restoring. Something sincere and refusing to back down when it would have been simpler to do so. There are many stories like mine. Every day, people encounter injustice in kitchens, workplaces, and workshops, leaving them to question their ability to rise above it. What I discovered is straightforward yet impactful perseverance pays off. And upholding your moral principles is more important than seeking praise. Ambition and noise can be replaced by smart, calm activity. I appreciate you taking the time to read this tale. It serves as a reminder that everyone can gain knowledge from one another's experiences. Please share your opinions or leave a comment below if this tale spoke to you. If you want to hear more tales like these, hit 1. And I encourage you to share your own tale of resiliency or silent triumph if you have one. It might motivate someone in need right now.